Sea change conclusion. Is the world being flipped upside down, or have we just been standing on our heads? This one's for the king of pop, a friend of the president, a very talented guy, the gloved one.
Like the river Jordan, and I will then say to thee, you are my friend. Carry me like you are my brother. Love me like a mother. Will you be there?
Friends, welcome back for the conclusion of our series on President Trump, Prospero, and the imminent sea change approaching the beach of our lives. We've taken some time to digest the president's first 100 days since this series started with its two foundational articles. The medium is the message, and as a newspaper trying to distinguish itself, we are guilty of trying to time our articles to the moments of maximum public awareness. It comes and goes like with individuals. Here is to the day when we can just cover how awesome exponential technological growth is. But until then, it's back to the trend of trends, so we can understand the regular news in deeper and more meaningful ways. We've been talking about how President Trump is like Prospero from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and how he is poised to not just alter our lives, but our understanding of them. Sort of how he is altering our understanding of Harvard. No, not with his tiny hands. The president isn't going to redefine our lives with his controversial economic tariffs either. Nor is the president a prototypical strongman emerging as the pendulum of popular politics swings again. Mr. President is something else entirely, and it seems so is Harvard.
If this sounds crazy to you, please check out Sea Change Part 1 and Part 2X, where we've done our best to playfully describe some of the more esoteric pillars that support our theory. Our theory that the president is going to help unravel way more than just Harvard, and that this Ivy League corruption trend emerging is just the beginning of our voyage.
Keep in mind our thesis, our 2025 Trends Almanac. This is a narrative spun in a fifth-generation war. Everyone has the same events, everyone lives on the same street, but that's where the similarities stop. When we intake these stimuli, we all feel it different despite our beating hearts. Despite the sound of our breath and the structure of our anatomy, we all fall into our respective buckets when we hear the news about what is happening at Harvard. Event happens, and we are torn apart into our tribes. Tribe A. The president is, still, a racist, and he hates brown people. He's taking Harvard away from brown people, because he is restoring white privilege, and everyone who supports the president is too stupid to understand that they are also racists, deep down. Tribe B. Harvard, a great American institution, has gradually been taken over and used as a nest for globalism, corruption, and crime, disguised behind the same elite trappings of the worst criminals ever. The Marxism they teach there is destroying the fabric of America. It has to be stopped, and God bless the president for standing up to all the corruption. Tribe C. Everything is bullshit. I am an enlightened person for understanding this. Nothing will ever come of this Harvard stuff. The world is run by secret societies, and Trump is as much a part of it as Harvard and all the rest of them. All I can do is enjoy the sunshine. I must help one robin unto his nest again, and I will not live in vain. Oh me, oh life. Tribe D. All I care about is my own quality of life. Stay out of my way. Leave me alone. I spend my time in glorified comfort pods. Tribe? Why would a prince pay for a president's legal education? For those to whom much has been given, much is required. All Americans must be responsible citizens, but some must be more responsible than others by virtue of their public or their private position, their role in the family or community, their prospects for the future, or their legacy from the past. We all have our tribes, But do we understand how Trump and Turing machines fit into all of this?
Weary, tell me will you hold me? When wrong will you scold me? When lost will you find me? But they told me I'm meant to be faithful and walk when not able and fight till the end, but I'm only human.
Right down the road, MIT just rejected all that Harvard is apparently fighting for. Why? Don't MIT and Harvard have a solidarity in their situation over there in Cambridge? If the enemy of my enemy is my friend, why aren't Harvard and MIT aligning? Since we're bringing MIT into this, could it be that perhaps the medium is the message? Marshall McLuhan, communication theorist, 1964. Understanding media, the extensions of man. McLuhan's insight is that the way we communicate, that is the medium, shapes more how we think, live and interact than the content of the message itself. In a culture like ours, long accustomed to splitting and dividing all things as a means of control, it is sometimes a bit of a shock to be reminded that, in operational and practical fact, the medium is the message.
So if we are incapable of rational thought because apparently we have been indoctrinated too much sugar is in our system from helping all the medicine go down, then maybe the president does in fact have to rely on the medium being his message. This would mean that we should expect Harvard to lead to something else, something bigger. If it doesn't, we must admit that we have been wrong about the president and Prospero. If Harvard is a metaphor for our postmodern American apathy, then maybe what President Trump is trying to do is to remove the sugar to expose the medicine, really the poison, that we have all been swallowing. And maybe that's the real medicine about all this. Can we imagine the struggle of communism in Russia, the defining archetypes of our parents and grandparents, suddenly finding fertile soil here in America? Political Marxism, most people know, the dipolar opposite of capitalism. Both systems suck. But it seems as though we only talk about how capitalism sucks. Like we forgot that Marxism sucks too. And worse, we forgot that it sucks more. One of America's intellectual treasures, still going at 94 years old, is Dr. Thomas Sowell. If you're a liberal, this guy studied under Milton Friedman and also has a PhD from the University of Chicago. If you consider Victor Davis Hanson as a Robin, perhaps Thomas Sowell is your Batman. And Dr. Sowell may have seen this issue of cultural Marxism as the child of political Marxism best in his 1985 book, Marxism, Philosophy and Economics. Check the price on the book if you want to know the man's place in history. The Marxist constituency has remained as narrow as the conception behind it. The Communist Manifesto, written by two bright and articulate young men without responsibility, even for their own livelihoods, much less for the social consequences of their vision, has had a special appeal for successive generations of the same kinds of people. The offspring of privilege have dominated the leadership of Marxist movements from the days of Marx and Engels through Lenin, Mao, Castro, Ho Chi Minh, and their lesser counterparts around the world and down through history. The sheer reiteration of the working class theme in Marxism has drowned out this plain fact. Sowell's brutally honest critique eventually crescendos. Crusaders for social justice seek to correct not merely the sins of man, but the oversights of God or the accidents of history. What they are really seeking is a universe tailor-made to their vision of equality.
We don't live in a perfect world. That doesn't mean we don't try to make it a better place. It just means we have to see things the way they are and not the way we want them to be. We're about to enter the age of biohacking and reality hacking, so don't expect this cultural Marxism trend to end anytime soon. Russia had theirs. We're having ours. Maybe in another 200 years the whole world can go woke together. Is MMXX full of hatred and racism for even saying this? Did we mention Dr. Sowell is a black guy from a dirt-poor family in Harlem? Go back and reread the words of this great American philosopher, please. He's literally like the last of the greats. And he actually was a real Marxist before he began to observe the veil of political, economic, cultural reality for himself. Have we stopped listening to old people yet? We will have to wait and see where this goes. Ever since 2015, we seem to be caught in this Trump tempest, and now it seems we may be about to get marooned on his island. If we're on this journey together through the darkness, just like Alonso, Ferdinand, Sebastian, Antonio, and the rest of the passengers in Shakespeare's play, does that mean we are about to be marooned in order for Prospero's game on the island to be played out? Only if Harvard leads to something else. If this fizzles into a nothing burger, then again, MXX will have to write a whole article about how we have been very, very wrong about a lot.
But if it doesn't, if Harvard leads to something else, then please understand it was chosen to help us understand. 5 gigawatts and so on and so forth. We don't claim to understand, just to believe. That undoubtedly there are people who have been asked to make choices, to comprehend, and to believe in humanity, and to continue to believe in Harvard at a level far beyond our relatively meaningless dribble in this Substack. If you don't have any suitable gifts, sometimes all you can do is bang on your drum, so bang as good as you can.
To be clear, although there is much we will unpack below, this is how the public at large is going to digest this over the next few weeks and months. 1. International student crisis thing. Why do we keep hearing about so much financial corruption by school with a stock market portfolio? 2. Francesca Gino was just the tip of academic fraud trying to manipulate the masses from ivory towers. 3. Oh yeah, I remember in 2020 and 2023, when there were high-profile arrests at Harvard pertaining to allegations of espionage. Even the former department chair for Harvard's chemistry program, Dr. Charles M. Lieber, was arrested. 4. Lieber, amongst others, may have had, although Harvard denies it, connections with Jeffrey Epstein. Some of the metaphorical waves described in our prior Sea Change articles, Wave X, Wave Y, Wave Z, are beginning to crash and reveal not just the energy of corruption crashing the waves themselves, but also that they have an undertow, a secret, unseen level of corruption energy influencing the waters above. Imagine the pain caused to those who have put their own energies into these systems, let alone how these systems have touched others in a networked fashion across our society. That was probably the idea, actually, to use the reach, scope, and prestige of a prominent university like Harvard to do something by someone connected above Jeffrey Epstein.
But Harvard isn't Harvard without international students. Dear gosh, maybe you should have gone to community college first. Sometimes people have to see things with their own eyes because they have no imagination of their own. Speaking of body parts, the guy from the Harvard morgue with half his face tattooed like a lizard finally, after years since his arrest for some apparent reason, the timing is pure coincidence, we're sure, just plead guilty last week on May 22nd to participating in the sale and interstate transport of human remains stolen from Harvard Medical School morgue from 2018 to 2020. Check out the press release from the Department of Justice. Gee, I wonder where this is all going. Oh, wonder.
Shout out to all the regular people having their lives destroyed by this scandal, which is growing and disgracing generations of honor by the minute, who worked very hard to be associated with Harvard. You don't need a big H on your jogging t-shirt any more than the Marine in A Few Good Men needed a patch on his shoulder to have honor. You are made in the image of God. As humans, we need to be more concerned with giving away what is already innately sacred within us for those outwardly things that we think have more meaning to us but don't. Harvard should honestly do the same. Maybe they should leave the windows of their divinity school open a little longer and have their faculty talk a little louder or something, 'cause like, right and wrong Harvard. Wait, is that the law school's thing actually?
What if Harvard has to hold Harvard accountable for Harvard, because Harvard's Harvard was secretly deep in the Harvard with Harvard, and the entire thing was being run behind the scenes by Harvard? Could they just hold this entire trial at Harvard? Harvard prosecution of the Harvard defense? The Crimson could report everything. At least it's not Dartmouth, honestly. Imagine the headline: Global Criminal Crime Syndicate has a secret in a forest in New Hampshire. Well, actually, now that you mention it, Epstein's Maxwell lady was arrested at a house in a forest in New Hampshire back when. So sorry about that, Dartmouth. At least you all got rejected from Harvard, so you don't have to worry about any of this. Maybe we should have said Brown. Global Crime Syndicate has a Brown secret. Or maybe international students from Columbia ditch Columbia for Columbia because Harvard.
To be real clear, Prospero similarly had 4 key actions that took his audience, his captives, deeper into the illusionary world he had created for them on the island. 1. Prospero commands the spirit Ariel to create a storm, the Tempest, that violently tosses his audience captive ship upon the water. 2. By controlling their perceptions and fear, Prospero and Ariel convince the ship's passengers that the vessel must be escaped before it is destroyed. 3. Prospero uses his powers, his magical powers, to get the storm to bring his enemies to his island. 4. Prospero ultimately renounces revenge, violence, and even his magic to do what is right.
Let's be tippy-top clear. 1. The president has spent the past decade bringing us to this point. 2. It's why the mainstream media can't stop talking about him. All the big news organizations and institutions are a part of the same thing Harvard is. 3. Harvard and the news media are tools in an international game of perception and war of narratives. 4. The biggest schools, brands, celebrities, banks, powers that be, whatever. This is the veil of reality that we have been alluding to, the one mentioned throughout the literature of our species, from Plato's Allegory of the Cave to Shakespeare's The Tempest to the Matrix films, being pulled back. Is there a veil of reality like the one in our stories being pulled back? This is what we are trying to figure out here. We've taken the long way to understand this esoteric notion because it's, well, esoteric in nature. But now it's time to wrap this up, even though we haven't even started this article yet. Esotericism. This tertiary conclusion will focus on what appears to be the president's first attempts at drawing back the aforementioned veil.
When we see the president take a personal role in affecting global commerce like with his tariffs, or play games with Harvard, are we looking at breadcrumbs or pigeon shit? When a man like Donald J. Trump says, "Kofi Faye, happy anniversary," we're all off into our buckets, hooting and hollering the slogans of our tribes. Maybe we need to consult an expert. Are there still lawyers who specialize in Chevron deference anymore, or has the president's own lawfare been that much more effective than his supposed adversaries? We can't afford to get this wrong, or we could end up eating bird shit, as long as we don't realize that we already have been and that we've grown to like it. After all, MXX isn't a biologist or gastronomy specialist. Maybe we should ask the generative processing transformers to form a Jedi council and use their collective wisdom to help us understand how these shitty breadcrumbs should taste. In a war of narratives about the truth of breadcrumbs, perhaps we'd do better to just ask the baker.
Or wait, maybe we should ask the pigeons. How dare we think to ask?
Show me, slowly. Told me, softly and boldly. Yeah, carry me there. I'm lead me, hold me, love me and feed me. Yeah, kiss me and free me. Yeah, I will feel better.
The president isn't like Prospero because we here at MMXX are Shakespeare aficionados or Trump University graduates. Although similarities abound, most noteworthy could be the revelation that our world is more interesting than we have been led to believe, and that President Trump and Prospero are uniquely suited and motivated to show us these breadcrumbs, and that is why the big guy in the White House is most like the old man in The Tempest. If you've ever read The Tempest by William Shakespeare, you may see why we feel this is an unappreciated metaphor.
Perhaps if the president can expose not just corruption at Harvard, but a false reality, a parallel Harvard, working against our own interests, that it would make sense this moment in time is the beginning of something greater, of the scenes that Shakespeare wrote which take place on the island. After all, if we have learned anything from the Diddy trial, it's that Diddy wasn't just an entertainer living la vida loca. So maybe Harvard isn't just a really good school. Maybe the public persona provides the deniability. Yeah, okay, and James Bond hates parties. Come on, guys. The highest form of warfare is stories, it's narratives. And this is why Prospero and the President are bound together so strongly for us. Both of these men have gone against the grain of traditional heroism, where the truth is brought into the open with reckless disregard for the lies spun around it. Rather than stating the plain truth, each have done what is unthinkable for regular heroes, but necessary to become legendary. They have played a dangerous game in order to use the game itself as part of their message. Whether it is a form of maneuver, defense, attack, or misdirection, we at MXXX cannot say. But we would all be fools to not see the connections beginning to form across the topography of modern American lawfare. From judges getting arrested, like the FBI did to Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan on April 25th, or how the New Mexico Supreme Court barred Donna Ana County Magistrate Jose Cano from ever holding a judicial office again after his arrest the day prior on April 24th for harboring an apparent trendy Aragua gang member in his house, to governors, etc., to Congress, etc., and the Senate, etc., to the nations of the world, to the Vatican, to Harvard. What on earth could make the president want to pick fights with so many people at the same time in his second term? What on God's green earth would make Donald Trump think that it's a good thing to annex the lands of other countries and start renaming landmarks? The man is off his rocker, always has seemed a little weird. He's a sociopath obsessed with his own legacy so much that he's trying to destroy it so he doesn't have to pass it on. He hates his kids? Maybe the president gets beat so badly by his sons at golf that he just wants to ruin the rest of their lives because Junior, Eric, and Barron can all outdrive him. It's so obvious, just like his stupid hair. Can everything we are being told by the news media be the truth of the news? And what technologies exist to help us understand the volume of the news moving around? Can new technologies help the news, or the courts, or voting, or the laws? Maybe we should just outlaw the internet? Does anybody have a novel idea here? Using the law to hold the lawless accountable might be a neat trick. Heck, in these times it's darn near outside the box. Is this the easiest thing the president could have done to get our attention? Perhaps Prospero could have just built a lighthouse and called it a day. Who cares about the truth? Who will be valiant for justice's sake, or at least risking oneself for it, especially if you've already lived a golden life? Just let Antonio, Alonso, and Sebastian float on by. In the highest traditions of noble literature and virtuous living, Shakespeare demonstrates in Prospero the heavenly ideal that good does not have to compromise itself to defeat evil. It doesn't return like for like, but it isn't naive either. Prospero forces the action upon his advisories in the same way that the president could be forcing actions and counter-reactions. It's a good tactic in chess and in war, so why not? So it's game theory, computers, lawyers, misdirection, military intelligence, and identity politics instead of soldiers and guns in the president's secret fifth-generation war? Well, maybe for the president it always has been, and this is why he's crashed our boat like Prospero onto his beach, to force the action. Not to take revenge, but to show us while he still can, to be the man in the arena, and to consequently change us and how we see things by changing how we see him and his opponents. Where's Hillary? Where is Obama? Where is Kamala and Biden? And how is Trump still standing after all of this going on for so long when the rest of them are gone? Do you want to keep your message in medium, or would you like to supersize it to an extra large for another quarter? If the president has been trying to fight a so-called deep state, could there really be any other way to victory against such an entrenched enemy than to find a way to use their own strengths against them? to turn their strengths into weakness, to take away their canals and their Harvards and their bought politicians and their silent weapons for quiet wars? Perhaps this is why some believe that the president has demonstrated the highest form of military masterstrokes, the art of war, the art of the deal. Forget 100 days. Is the president tying a bow on the past 200 years by exposing a war of narratives? How do you explain something to someone if you can't tell them because they wouldn't believe you? What is Canada? What is USAID? What is Harvard? What is prostate cancer? What is the Department of Energy? What is the 42nd Congress? What is immigration? What is the United States of America? And why are we writing this in all caps? It's not your fault if the echo chamber is making it hard to understand. 90% of all news media is controlled by the same 6 companies. They all believe the same thing, at least about us knowing the truth of the news. Even though they say different words on the screen, we know it's so they can drop headlines into as many buckets of our tribes as possible. It's like getting the mail, sort of. They drop it off. We know they drop it off. They know we know they drop it off. We know they know we know they drop it off. Except it's just bird crap. Whatever our biases may have been originally, we have become so inundated by the medium that we forgot our own message and just repeat what we hear now. Why do you think fact-checking is such a big thing? Are we even organically engaged in civil discourse about all these social issues, or are we just ready to all throw down at this point because that's all we know anymore? Are these moments right now not the emergence of our greater tribe? How badly must we hurt one another until we see it as hurting ourselves? Think about it. There must be higher love.
Characterization, misdirection, organization. Like Prospero, the president may have a devotion to a higher love in his lesser-known story, his truer story, the one behind the facade of the TV personality, or his legal affront to the Ivy League, the story of his secret connection to the heights of science and destiny.
This is what Prospero discovered on the island, and this is most likely where the president lives most days inside his own mind, in the future being created by the historical purpose from his past, the one left to him by his uncle, the one forged at MIT by the government and Nikola Tesla and President Trump's uncle. For a man who is already old and established, there aren't many good rationalizations for why he is on such a tier so late in life. Maybe he found himself being handed the ball and he has to run as best as he can before handing it off again. Maybe there is a destiny to the president and this moment in history that will redefine all these narratives and counter-narratives. If you browse our archive, we hope you will please note how MMXX places a premium on understanding the trends driving the news, so our ecosystem can understand the news in deeper and more meaningful ways. Understanding the trends behind the president's life similarly helps us to understand him in deeper and more meaningful ways. While all things Trump are usually highly divisive issues abounding in misinformation and bias, President Trump is in point of fact the absolute equivocal media trend of the past 20 years. Again, for better for worse. Just go to ChatGPT and enter, "Who is the most reported person in the media over the past 20 years?" Did you guys get the same answer we did? See, isn't it nice when we have a machine between our arguments to help us calculate the truth? If calculating the truth is something you're interested in, you might want to check out our 2025 Trends Journal or read more in depth about how it was the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz who gave us the notion of a modern Characteristica Universalis, or a reckoning machine which could allow for disputes to be settled by saying, "Let us calculate," which appeared in our article, What Shadows Talk About. Behind Our Backs, from August 19, 2023. It is imperative to understand that if we do not use Web3 to build a system of techno-social governance to track the provenance of the news and what is true, TPTB will provide it for us. This is the great business no one is building right now. This is also the place there is no real competition. The future of the news is described in our archived white paper, and we are at your service in this regard.
Don't behave! Slowly.
As the fires of misinformation continue to have the jet fuel of AI dumped onto them, the need for a modern characteristica universalis will only grow. Reckoning machines are a small fraction of what is evolving before our eyes in this techno-social tempest, but it's a classic technological evolution of combining technologies to create new paradigms. There is a lot about to come off the shelves that couldn't have been possible without AI. Now everything is going to begin to go vertical. If you haven't already, check out the epic 2027 white paper on AI making its way around the internet. Imagine that tokens have become as ubiquitous as emails or texting, and that your identity, your finances, your communications, and your files are all cryptographically involved in supporting a global economy of information. Imagine this is how you make money, or that this type of crypto-economic system generates passive income for people in the future. Maybe based off of tokenizing our personal data so we can make money from it instead of big tech. Imagine that moment in the future is born out of this moment right now. In the way that environmental finance has been trying to get a market price for carbon, we may be witnessing several financial technologies come together in a revolutionary way at a revolutionary time in order to destroy misinformation by creating a new economic information paradigm. Consider this. President Trump created the US Space Force. One of the first things the Space Force did was send Master Sergeant Philip Lowery to MIT to study Bitcoin. I wonder if they thought to send him to Harvard. Regardless, Lowery correctly understands Bitcoin's military application in the context of a new fifth generation of warfare and writes his thesis, now famous, Software, a Novel Theory on Power Projection and the National Strategic Significance of Bitcoin. Lowery's insight is that in the same way that a tank projects its power on the land or a plane in the air, so it is with POW in cyberspace. Is the president going to radically alter international finance and is playing Prospero with crypto too in the same way he is playing around with Harvard? Could this potentially redefine the entire history of the relationship between distributed ledger technologies and tokens? Why is he playing around with crypto anyways? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Is he going to mess up Ethereum or Bitcoin? Is the aforementioned veil of reality financial in nature in part or whole? Does it have anything to do with crypto? What are the chances of going all the way back to stuff like FTX that this is all one thing President Prospero wants to talk about it on the island? Great. For those hoping this wild ride was going to end soon, it may just be getting going, and in all honesty, everything we have ever published here is like a small piece of this much larger story, the story of this sea change. There are a lot of Substacks that do a better job of explaining all of this, but we like to think we have the most fun, and we also have a better plan to restore the soul and purpose of journalism. So whether it's the President's Tempest or MMXGEX journalism journey, or the journey you are personally going through in your own life, remember the stories to light your way because it's not the destination, it's the journey. And a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Even though sometimes the longest journey we make is the 16 inches from our head to our hearts, we remember every journey begins in the mind and is measured not in miles, but in moments. The road may be long, but the view is worth it. When attempting to peer beyond the aforementioned veil of reality of the president, we must remember that you don't always need a map to find your way, and since we're journeying through the darkness together, keep the headlights on. We can only see as far as the lights shine, but we can make the whole trip this way. And so, without further ado, let us calculate, let us strive, let us wonder. Let us imagine a world where the physical restraint, the electronic retardation of a computer's processing power that the Bitcoin proof of work, PAW algorithm can place upon a computer is adapted to fight misinformation. In the 76-day period between Trump winning and Biden leaving office, $93 billion was sent from the DOE, who gave it away with no oversight to companies with no financials. I think we can all agree about this one, right? No matter the tribe, we all pay taxes. So WTF is going on? Maybe it's a good thing we're all so indoctrinated at playing the victim card now that this time we can change things instead of fighting each other all over again. Doge seems to be circling the Fed like a shark. Gee. I wonder what will happen. Maybe we should ask the creature from Jekyll Island. Why did Director Powell just visit the White House? Oh, wonder.
Lift me up, hold me up, lift me up sometime. I will feel better.
Maybe our lives are like the internet. There is the surface level that we all use every day. And then there are the subsurface, deeper and darker levels of life that control the surface, and we just act like it's not 90% of what's going on because the surface is our 100% and it's all we know. Have you guys ever seen Free Willy? Did you know that the theme song done by Michael Jackson has a coded message in it? Remember when we showed you how to hack your MacBook and find the secret Bitcoin white paper installed on every Apple hard drive? Check this one out. It seems like we may need to add the King of Pop to the list of people who have tried to tell us about the hidden veil of reality. Before the soundtrack for the movie came out July 13, 1993, Michael Jackson had already released Dangerous on November 21, 1991. Other Substacks are better suited to point out the esoteric iconography on the cover and its striking similarities to other well-known esoteric artwork. MXX is however well matched to inform you about how we believe it was Michael Jackson's own Prospero Equus moment when he uses his own words to talk to us.
In our darkest hour, in my deepest despair, will you still care? Will you be there? In my trials and my tribulations, through our doubts and frustrations, in my violence, in my turbulence, through my fear and my confessions, in my anguish and my pain, through my joy and my sorrow, in the promise of another tomorrow. I'll never let you part, for you're always in my heart.
Michael Jackson said this at the end of the song, which was different than the Free Willy version's ending that stopped with the sung lyrics. MJ spoke that like a poem with his voice. For his fans, it might as well be a million words long, those few lines. Opposite this unique ending of Will You Be There is also a different intro. For some reason, MJ put a lost opening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, specifically a segment from a lesser-known portion of nothing less than Ode to Joy. I guess it's nice and a little weird to hear classical music before an MJ track.
Those willing to continue their research, or who have at least read this far, may also learn that this section also has German lyrics written by an esoteric guy way back when named Friedrich Schiller. Could these lyrics from Schiller be what MJ was trying to tell us by including the corresponding music from Beethoven's Ninth?
Ihr stürzt nieder, Millionen, ahnest du den Schöpfer, Welt? Such ihn überm Sternenzelt, über Sternen muss wohnen.
Do you bow down, millions? Do you sense the creator world? Seek him beyond the starry canopy. Beyond the stars must he dwell. The medium is the message. We don't claim to understand, only to believe. As the technologies of yesterday's revolutions are combined with those of today's to bring us our tomorrows, so too are the stories of yesterday's icons being combined with the now to bring us the future. New paradigms in 3, 2, 1.
Lift me up slowly. Thanks, King.